The work of the historian is a skills-based course, but in it you need to have knowledge of the different sources that historians use to find out about the Middle Ages. Things such as the Domesday Book, Saxon Chronicles, archaeological evidence. You also need to know about the Renaissance or the Tudor period and different sources that historians use to find out about that. So again, they use archaeological digs, but you've now got paintings and you've got diaries like Stanley Pepys' diary. You also need to know about the Victorian era or the Industrial Age and different sources of historians use to find out about that. So you've got the new industrial buildings coming up, the factories, you've got the census that's introduced that provides vital information towards the end of the Victorian period. Of course, you've got photographs as well. And then into the 20th century, the earlier part of the 20th century and the later part, and the new sources are available then, especially with the creation of new media such as the cinema, and later with computers and increased photography, for example. And in the exam, you'll be asked 5 questions, which will always have the same stem. The first question to warm you up will always be, what does source A tell you about whatever it is the subject the exam paper is about? We won't know in advance what era or what subject it will be. Hopefully something you don't know anything about, so you'll be able to look at the sources with a fresh brain. So, what does source A tell you? Source A tell you about the topic that the paper is about, and you have to try to infer what the source is saying. You have to say the source tells me this, and it tells me this because I can see this line in the source or this thing in the picture. Question 2 will ask you, what impression does the source, probably usually source B, give you about whatever the topic is? And what you'll need to do to answer that well is you say, well, this is the impression the source is giving me. This is the evidence in the source that's giving me the impression. And this is why the author of this source is trying to give me this impression. Question 3 for 10 points will always ask you, to what extent does one source or 2 sources support another source? So what extent does source D support sources B and C, or source B support the other? So you need to say, well, these 2 sources say the same as this source, for example, this, this and this, but they say some slightly different things as well because of this, this and this. You would also want to suggest reasons why these 2 sources might say the same or different things because of this, maybe written by the same type of person or from the same time period, for example. And then writing a conclusion saying, well, overall, on balance, they do greatly support that source, or they don't. Question 4 will always be, how useful are these 2 sources to a historian studying a certain subject or doing a certain thing, for example, creating a display in a museum? For this answer, you need to say, well, on one hand, these sources are really useful because they've got this in it, the content, but also they're from this provenance. It was created by this person who know a lot about it or was there at the time. But on the other hand, these sources wouldn't be useful because they don't have these things in it, or they have this misleading information in it, and the provenance, who wrote it, isn't very reliable. So on balance, you need to write a conclusion summarising how useful they are or not. Finally, question 5 is the biggie. It's a 16-point one, so this is really where the money is. You always have a statement about the topic. Okay, so here's a statement, usually a controversial statement. What might be the difficulties the historian has proving this, and what research might they do to prove it? And so you need to use your knowledge of the different types of sources from the various ages, and using that knowledge build an answer. So if there's a question about the Middle Ages, you might say the difficulties, whether it was a long time ago, that not many people could write at the time, because it was only the rich people who controlled the flow of information. But then that you could still look at old medieval parish churches, you could still look at the Domesday Book, you could have a look at the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, with the understanding these were just upper class people writing it, to build, to find out whether the statement is true or not. So, if you manage to learn those sources, and if you manage to learn the answer stems to these questions, then you should have this one back.